Joe knows taxes.
Joe knows the market.
Joe knows Social Security.
Joe knows income planning.
Joe knows pickleball? No.
This is Joe Knows Retirement.
Today I want to talk about an article I just read recently about Peak 65. Now, what is Peak 65? Now, Peak 65 talks about all the baby boomers who are turning 65 this year. And in 2024, it's going to be a record-breaking year where 11,000 people, Americans, a day are expected to turn 65 until December this year. And so as we know, that is a large number that's going to hit this year. But also, as we know, this has happened for the last 10 years and it's going to happen for 10 more years. And this is what we call an influx into our system. And so I'm going to talk about this article and then just talk about how this is going to impact retirement planning and what do we need to know to make sure we can have the best plan moving forward. So with this Peak 65, there's going to be about 4 million people turning 65 this year. That is a lot of people, and that's actually expected to be about the same for about all the way until 2027 based on this article. And so that is going to be a huge influx into our system. And so what does this mean for our retirement? Well, one is when it comes to Medicare. Part A is what you've paid into all of those years, all of those working years that you're now eligible for. And then there's Part B, where that's an additional coverage that most people get, and that's going to give you have to pay for that coverage. It's going to give you a little more coverage there, obviously. And so with Part B, you may not have to pay for that at 65. You may be able to delay it if you're currently covered by a group health insurance plan, and if so, then you can delay it without any penalty. Now, if you are not covered by a health insurance through your employer, well, if you delay it, you could be faced with a penalty, and so that may be something we want to be aware of. Now, with these items that we're discussing, let's talk about the impact of all of these 65-year-olds now becoming on Medicare. Well, as we know with Medicare Part A, there's no cost for this point, and so there's an influx in the system of people needing Medicare or government health insurance, and that's ultimately going to come at a cost, and who's going to pay for that cost? Well, we would think us, taxpayers, right? And so that's something that we have to consider with this influx in the system. And that's why you've heard all these years that Medicare is in trouble and the cost of Medicare is rising so significantly. And so if you look back in history, Medicare has been increasing at over a 7% rate each year. That means that Medicare costs are going to double every 10 years if that's the rate that is increased at. And they're expecting that Medicare costs are going to go up by about 6% moving forward. And so every 10 to 12 years, we can expect that Medicare costs are going to double over time. And so if we're 50 or 60 years old, by the time we get to 80 or 90, we're going to have to pay a lot of money for Medicare throughout our retirement because of this influx into the system, and more people are living longer but not necessarily healthier, which means that not only more people are needing it, but we're needing it more often because of those situations. And so because of that, that is something we have to plan for, and making sure we've got our investments that are going to grow over time to keep up with the rising cost of inflation, the rising cost of healthcare, to keep up with maybe potentially higher taxes is something that we need to have a plan for. Now, the other consideration with this whole Peak 65 idea is Social Security. And we all know Social Security's been in trouble. We all know that they tell us every day Social Security's going to run out. Now, it's my opinion that I don't think Social Security is going to run out. I don't think that we should claim it as soon as possible for the fear that it's going to run out. And the reason why is because even if they just make reductions, 20%, if they reduce everyone's benefit by about 20 to 25%, it's still good to go moving forward. Now, none of us would want to see that, especially all of these Peak 65 people, because they've worked for it for the last 40 years. They want to get what they're entitled to. And so I don't expect them to make that type of big adjustment because, one, that's a lot of people who are voting during that time period. But also, if you look back in history, typically they grandfather in. They don't make any significant changes to the people at that time is something that I would think about. But if you go back to Paris not too long ago, they changed the retirement age by about 2 years, and they made it worse off for people in retirement, and there's riots every day there. And so I don't think that the U.S. will make that significant of a change. And if it is, I expect it to be more minor is what we would expect, or make a multitude of changes that affects everyone in some ways is what that could be. And that could be a lower cost of living adjustment ongoing. That could be changing the retirement ages for people who haven't reached that yet. That could be for people who are working, have to pay more in to Social Security. So there's a lot of adjustments that can be made over time in order to keep this in place. And so, but we do have to understand that Social Security is in trouble and that changes are going to have to be made. And if you don't think they will, just look back in history and I can tell you they've already made changes. For example, Social Security used to not be taxable and now it is. And so we have to be aware of those types of changes. And, just understand that in 1935, when Social Security was enacted, we're in a little bit of a different time in this stage. We've got people living much longer than they did in 1935. Life expectancy in 1935 was about 60. Life expectancy here today, well, that's about 78, depending on if you're 65 or older. It could be even more than that, right? And so because of all those reasons, hey, Social Security is going to be in trouble. Because all these people are retiring peak 65, there's not as many people working anymore. There's not as many people paying into it. When Social Security started, there was about 40 workers for every one retiree. Now that number's down to 3 to 1. And so because of that, there's not as much revenues going into the system. So that's going to be another concern with this peak 65 of this influx into our retirement generation is Social Security could potentially get reduced or changes could happen. And so we need to make sure we have a solid plan to supplement Social Security because we do know that Social Security is going to cover about 40% of income in retirement on average. And where are we going to get the rest of that 60%? And what if something happens to Social Security where it gets reduced or less favorable for us? We need to have a plan to supplement that difference as well as something that we would encourage people to do. Something else to consider for this peak 65 crowd is, most of them are probably getting ready to retire or they're already retired. And so if that's the case, we need to start thinking about options with our 401k. And so if you're still working at peak 65 or you're still working past age 59 and a half is the magic number there, then you can do something called an in-service withdrawal with the majority of 401ks out there. And that's where you take your 401k and you move it to an IRA. And the reason why you would do this is so you have more investment options in that IRA. And you can also do other tax planning strategies, maybe such as a Roth conversion in that IRA that you may not be able to do a strategy like a Roth conversion within your 401k. So it's going to give you more options, more flexibility, more benefits is something that we would encourage people to look at. Now, if you do this in-service withdrawal, you can still fund your 401k. You can still get the company match ongoing. It would just have a zero balance that you would be growing on, and the balance would move over into that IRA would be the idea. And so that may be something you consider if you're over age 59 and a half. And you're still working. But if you're retired, then regardless of your age, then you can move that money to an IRA to have the more investment options that we discussed and to have that ability for tax planning. Now, with the investment options, typically 401ks only have about 10 to 20 options. IRAs have multitude of options, thousands of options that you have to choose from that may be able to better fit your goals, maybe able to get higher interest rates than other options, maybe able to have more diversification. And so those are the things you want to consider and seeing if that switch would make sense for you at this point in your retirement. But obviously most people we work with, they move their 401ks to an IRA for us to manage for them. And in that is we're going to be able to help them not having to worry about it on their own. We're going to be able to take care of that for them. And again, ensure that we're looking at all the options on the marketplace to ensure they get what we feel is best for them. Now, something else I always have to make sure I talk about is taxes, right? So as we know with peak 65, with more people retiring, with the debt currently high as it can be, with Social Security in trouble, Medicare in trouble, a lot of people are left with the question of what's going to happen to taxes. Well, if you're asking me for my opinion, I wrote a book about it called I Hate Taxes, and in my opinion, I think tax rates have to go up. They have to go up for a multitude of reasons, and if you believe the same, then what are we doing today to plan for this? If we think that tax rates are going to be higher throughout retirement, now may be the time to start planning, being proactive versus reactive. Having our plan, not Uncle Sam's plan, right? Uncle Sam's plan, we say we just go status quo. We just keep our tax-deferred investments like they are. We'll just trust that Uncle Sam will keep tax rates the same or lower, and we'll just go status quo. Or your plan says, I don't know what can happen. The tax code's written in pencil. I better start acting now on tax planning strategies. We mentioned the Roth conversion a minute ago. That's something we're seeing a lot of people do by being proactive with all of those retirement savings that you may have saved all these years and starting to move some of that over to a Roth, pay your taxes now so you don't have to pay more on it in the future as your investment grows. And so maybe strategies like that are going to be attractive for you to prepare for these higher tax brackets in the future. And doing those types of strategies now before you take Social Security so you have less income to impact that. Doing that now before you reach Medicare age, because in Medicare age you could potentially cause you to pay more in Medicare premiums by doing a Roth conversion. And that may not be a bad thing, and it could be, well, it's not a good thing, but it may not prevent you from doing a Roth conversion. Maybe it still makes sense to do a Roth conversion if you're 63 or older, because Medicare premiums go back 2 years to see what your income was 2 years ago to see what you're going to get at 65. And so maybe it still makes sense at that time, but maybe if we're able to do it before 63, if you're listening to this ahead of that time, maybe it makes more sense because now we can do more Roth conversion without having to worry about Medicare premiums. But if you're always going to expect yourself to pay higher Medicare premiums in the future because your income is going to be higher from potentially RMDs, required minimum distributions, maybe a pension, maybe higher Social Security, then maybe a 1 year Roth conversion and increasing Medicare premiums, or 2 years or 3 years, could make it worthwhile if we have ongoing lower Medicare premiums. So if you're always going to expect to be in higher Medicare premiums, maybe we pay it for a few years so we can always end up in lower by reducing our RMD so it's not as high to keep us under those tiers. And so those are things that we have to think about as we are in or near retirement is tax planning. Again, if you're looking for more tax planning guidance, go ahead and download or request our book. If you're listening to this on a podcast, go to our website. We have a place there that you can download it, peakretirementplanning.com. If you're watching here on YouTube, if you go down to the description below, there's actually a link there you can fill out to have us send you a book there, and making sure you can read more information on how to do tax planning at this time when you're in or near retirement. Again, that book's mostly for those who are 55 to 70 that are in or near and just looking for ways to save money on taxes. Typically, we get people who like that book based on, they tell us, hey, I feel like I'm overpaying in taxes, and reading the book was able to show me some strategies of how to reduce that. Is something that may encourage you about. So if that's you and you don't want to pay more than your fair share, you don't want to tip Uncle Sam, then that book will be a great one to read, and making sure you have a plan for it before this big old retirement that's ahead of us. One other thing I want to think about that I see so often is, with this peak 65 crowd is, okay, now we're getting ready to retire. Now, what's retirement going to look like for us? Now, this is something you're going to have to think hard about. This is something that we do with our clients. We call it a dreams, missions, and values conversation. And we try to hold our clients accountable. We try to encourage our clients to think further of what their purpose of their money is for. Is the purpose of their money to spend every last dollar and have the last check bounce back when they pass away? If so, then great. Let's have a plan set so you know exactly how much you can spend so you're not wasting the opportunity to enjoy the money you have. Or maybe your goal is, I want to leave all this money to a charity. Well, how can we do that in the most tax efficient way? And do you want to do that now while you're living, or later when you pass away, do you just want to leave a huge check behind? And based on your strategy is going to lead to the tax planning strategies you're looking for. Or maybe you say, I just want to maximize my legacy to my kids and my grandkids. Well, what is your current plan to do so? Do you have more sophisticated trust set up to making sure you can detail exactly where that money is going to go and how is it going to get to that second generation? Are you planning for the tax bill that's going to come up for your kids and grandkids? Are you going to have Uncle Sam as a beneficiary? Are you going to try to kick him out? There's strategies you can start doing today to start planning for that. And so if you don't know what you're going to do, how are you going to have the best plan? And now we work with a lot of people who may not know what they're doing right now, but have some sort of idea. And so we're going to start planning for what we feel is best. And if something changes, well, that's the point of a plan, is it can change, it can adjust, is something that you just have to make aware based on if your goals change over time. And so that's something we really encourage you of, is how will you spend your time and your money in retirement? So we just talked about how you would spend your money. And the other thing with spending your money is, we see a lot of people, again, the Midwestern millionaires, what we call them, where they have saved, and they are the worst spenders, is what we say. They're great savers, but they're bad spenders. And so you may not want to spend any money in retirement. It maybe doesn't give you joy to do so. Maybe it just makes you feel anxious. And if that's the case, then don't spend any money. But if you're looking for permission to spend money and you've saved enough money and you have a great plan moving forward, well, then why not? Because at this point, it is hard to make that adjustment from saving to spending, because now you're starting to see your accounts come down, whereas all the years you saw them go up. But you have to remember, you're now at a different phase of life, right? The mountain analogy. You're no longer in the accumulation phase. You're in the deaccumulation phase, coming down the mountain. It's a different time. It's time to enjoy it, is maybe the thought process. So that's what we want to think about on the money side of retirement. Have the peace of mind to know that you've saved enough money if that's the case. Now, on the other side is the time. How you spend your time, and this is something we always want to encourage people of, is, hey, retirement should be enjoyable, right? What if we worked hard for the last 40 years to not be able to enjoy retirement? But one thing that we see, though, is when people make that retirement, if they don't have something of purpose to do anymore, they may not feel as joyful in retirement. So we're not telling you to work forever. but we are telling you to think about how you actually spend your time in retirement. Will you be volunteering? Will you be working part-time? Will you be spending time with grandkids? How will you fill your days so you have something to look forward to when you wake up in the morning, something that excites you, something that makes you want to keep living? And so that's ultimately something we want to challenge people to think about, because we see too many people, they retire and now they don't have the community from work. They don't have people looking up to them as a leader. They're a little stale at that point. They just need more excitement. And so making sure you have a plan for those things, because golfing every day is great, but it starts to get old and it may not give you as much purpose. So something just to consider is that what can you do to make that retirement as fruitful as possible with your time? Another thing that we really encourage a lot of our clients with who have been diligent savers is maybe we use our money to buy us time. Maybe that means we have someone come in to clean the house. Maybe we have someone cook us meals. Maybe we go out to eat more so we can spend valuable time with family and friends and not have to worry about doing the dishes or cooking the meal. And so how do we take this money that we've worked so hard for to give us the most precious thing in the world back, which is time? And that's something we work with a lot of our clients. For example, we had a client who they had house problems. They needed house improvements. And the husband said, I will get it done. I will get it done. Well, he was busy and he never got it done. And that other spouse, his wife, was not very happy about that. And so we encouraged them, hey, just go hire someone, get it done. You've got work off your plate. Your wife is happy now because they don't have to bug you anymore and you don't have to do the work. So let's do it. And sure enough, they went and spent their money on that. And they told us it was the best thing that money has bought them, because it bought them time and it bought them peace of mind and it got their problem solved so they could enjoy their house moving forward and not have to look at the thing and go, man, there's just work to do. Now they can look at it and say, wow, that looks nice. So even small things like that can make a big difference in retirement. And if you can buy some time, maybe you can spend more time with grandkids. Maybe you can do golfing more. You can go travel more. And so that's something we'd encourage you of. Maybe you go get a travel agent so you can go on more trips without having to plan them out, and making sure it's more joyful and more less work, to plan all those out, because we know traveling can be a burden at times. And so hopefully you can take some of these lessons here with that time and money conversation. But again, understanding the current situation that you're in, but by having a solid plan and by implementing tax planning strategies and retirement planning strategies correctly, you could put yourself in a very, very good position moving forward. But as we all know, we have to plan now, not later. We need to be proactive, not reactive. And so that's our biggest advice to you here today, is for those peak 65 people who are near 65 or already 65 or older, making sure you have that retirement in place so these can be the golden years of your life, so that you can enjoy what you've achieved and worked so hard for over all these years. So hopefully this video is helpful for you. Go ahead and subscribe to this channel if you're looking for more, and we'll keep the videos coming for you, and we'll see you on the next one.
Since we do not know your specific situation, none of this information can serve as tax, legal, insurance, or financial advice and may be outdated or inaccurate. The information comes from sources believed to be reliable but cannot be guaranteed. This content is prepared for educational purposes only. If you need advice, please contact a qualified CPA, attorney, insurance agent, financial advisor, or the appropriate professional for the subject you would like help with. Peak Retirement Planning, Inc. is an Ohio-based registered investment advisor and able to offer advisory services in Ohio and in other states where registered or exempt from registration.